Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today, I want to take you into a story that doesn't look like a story at first, because there are no dramatic villains, no sudden explosions, no obvious turning points that announce themselves with fireworks. Instead, this is the kind of story that happens in a quiet room, in a quiet body, in a quiet mind, while the world keeps moving outside the window as if nothing is wrong. The title of today's episode is The Hidden Psychology Behind Self-Neglect. And because this topic can feel heavy and hard to hold all at once, I'm going to divide the story into 10 parts so it's easier to follow, easier to breathe through, and easier to recognize yourself in, if any of it belongs to you. So take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop, just a little. And let's begin. Part 1, The Silent Gap. There is a strange kind of distance that can exist inside a person, a distance measured not in miles but in inches, the distance between your hand and a glass of water, between your feet and the floor, between your eyes and the sink full of dishes that has been waiting for you for days. You feel the signal first, the soft internal flare that says, you're thirsty, or you're cold, or you should eat something, and the signal isn't subtle, it's sharp and clear, like a small light turning on in a dark hallway. And yet, the action that should follow that signal, stand up, walk over, drink, close the window, rinse the plate, feels like it belongs to someone else's body, like the controls have been moved behind glass. You are not confused about what needs to happen. You know the simple math of it. You know that water eases the dryness in your throat, that a meal would steady your blood sugar, that a shower would loosen the film of heaviness sticking to your skin. And that's what makes it so hard to explain, because from the outside it looks like you are choosing discomfort, as if you simply don't care. But inside, what you feel is not indifference. Inside, you feel a low vibrating static in the space between knowing and doing, as if the bridge between thought and movement has become a suspended, humming wire that your body refuses to step onto. You might be sitting on the edge of your bed, scrolling without taking anything in, or staring at the wall while time slides past you like water slipping through your fingers, and you can hear the part of you that still believes in cause and effect whispering, if you just get up, you'll feel better, but the whisper lands on a nervous system that doesn't respond to logic right now. The gap remains, silent and stubborn, and the longer it stays there, the more it starts to feel like a verdict against your character, even though it is really a symptom, a message written in a language most people were never taught to read. And the most unsettling part is how normal it can look. There is no siren. There is no obvious emergency. There is just you, in a room that slowly gathers dust, in a body that slowly gathers fatigue, watching yourself drift an inch at a time away from the person you thought you were supposed to be. Part 2, You're not ignoring yourself. You know what people say when they see the evidence. When they hear that you skipped a meal again, when they notice the same hoodie you've been wearing for 3 days, when they step into your space and their eyes pause, just for half a second too long, on the clutter that seems to be multiplying on its own. They say it gently if they're kind, and sharply if they're tired, but the meaning is the same, you need to take better care of yourself. And the sentence lands with a sting, because it carries an assumption that you've been refusing to do something simple, that you have been neglecting your needs the way someone neglects to answer an email, casually and carelessly, because it doesn't matter to them. But you are not casual about it. You are not careless. In fact, you might be painfully aware of every small degradation, every stiffness in your neck that tightens like a rope, every brittle, dry edge of your skin, every headache that pulses behind your eyes like a warning light. You notice the dishes. You notice the laundry. You notice the unopened mail that sits on the counter like a stack of quiet demands. You notice the way your body feels heavier when you stand, the way your sleep is never quite enough, the way your mind feels fogged and slow, like it is running on a low battery that won't hold a charge. You are not blind to your situation. If anything, you are too aware, and the awareness doesn't motivate you the way it should. It doesn't light a fire under you. It just adds another layer of weight. Because now it's not only the tasks you can't seem to do, it's the constant internal witnessing of your own inaction, the sense that you are watching your life from a slight distance, like someone observing a machine begin to stutter while being unable to open the panel and reach the wiring inside. And in that space, shame begins to hum. Not the dramatic shame of being caught doing something wrong, but the low-grade, persistent kind that settles in your chest like fog. It whispers, "What is wrong with you? Why can't you do what everyone else does without thinking? Why does a shower feel like a mountain? Why does feeding yourself feel like paperwork?" You might try to argue with it. You might remind yourself of your own intelligence, your own capability, your own history of handling things. You might even make plans, write lists, download apps, set reminders, buy organizers, watch motivational videos that promise to transform you into a person who wakes up early and drinks lemon water and keeps their kitchen spotless. You might try to brute force your way back into the life you think you should be living. And sometimes, for a day or two, you can. Sometimes adrenaline will lend you a temporary spine, and you will clean, and shower, and reply to messages, and the outside world will sigh with relief, as if the problem has been solved. But then the bridge collapses again. The gap returns. The static hums. And the shame grows louder, not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you can't stand the full sensation of caring. Part 3, When Care Feels Like a Threat. Here is the hidden part that most people never see. Sometimes, the very acts that would restore you can register inside your nervous system as danger. Not metaphorical danger. Not, "I don't feel like it," danger. Real danger, the kind that makes your body tighten, your breathing shallow, your stomach drop, as if you are about to step into a fight you didn't consent to. You know that sleep would help, but when you try to go to bed early, something in you flinches, as if rest is not neutral but risky. You know that eating a real meal would stabilize you, but the thought of chopping vegetables or washing a pan feels like walking into bright light after months in a dim room, and your body reacts with the same resistance it would have toward a threat. You know that cleaning your space would calm your mind, yet even standing up to throw away a piece of trash can feel like lifting a car off your chest. It's not that you don't want relief. It's that relief demands contact. Relief demands that you step closer to your own body, closer to your own environment, closer to the truth of your needs. And if your needs have been ignored for a long time, by you, by others, by life itself, then turning toward them can feel like turning toward a room where something painful is waiting. You feel this in the way your chest tightens when you look at the sink, in the way your throat closes when you consider responding to a text that says, "How are you?" because you know the honest answer and you also know you can't say it without opening a door you've kept locked. You feel it in the way your heart speeds up when you think about making an appointment, not because you fear the appointment itself, but because it requires you to admit that you exist in a world of consequences, deadlines, obligations, and visibility. And that is what makes self-care so complicated for a nervous system that has learned a particular kind of survival. In healthier seasons, self-care is maintenance, like oiling a hinge so it doesn't squeak. In this season, self-care is exposure. Self-care is stepping out of the bunker. Self-care is lifting your head above water when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what breathing felt like. So your body does something that looks, from the outside, like resistance. But from the inside, it feels like protection. It feels like a guard at the door saying, "Not yet. Not now. It's not safe." And you begin to live in the painful contradiction of wanting to feel better while being terrified of the very processes that would help you get there. Part 4, The Body That Learned to Stop. If we were telling this story in a different era, we might call it laziness, or weakness, or a lack of moral fiber, because those are the labels society reaches for when it doesn't have a better vocabulary. But your body is not a moral creature. Your body is a survival creature. It does not care about your productivity. It does not care about your reputation. It cares about one thing, keeping you alive. And sometimes, keeping you alive does not look like motivation. Sometimes it looks like minimizing your footprint on the world, lowering your metabolic demand, shrinking your needs until they are small enough to manage inside an overwhelmed system. There is a hierarchy to the way the nervous system protects an organism. When danger feels escapable, the body mobilizes, your heart rate rises, your blood moves faster, your muscles prepare to run or fight. That's the kind of stress response people know, because it's dramatic and visible and easy to name. But there is another response, older and quieter, that shows up when the system concludes that fighting won't work and running isn't possible, when the threat feels inescapable or never-ending. In that case, the body doesn't rev up. It shuts down. It pulls the brake while the engine still hums underneath. It turns the volume down on action. It reduces movement, not because it is giving up, but because it is trying to conserve resources in an environment it has assessed as hostile. It is the biological equivalent of playing dead, not in the theatrical sense of collapsing on the ground, but in the modern sense of lying in bed for hours while knowing you need to use the bathroom, scrolling through your phone while feeling your body grow heavier, sitting in your car after work because the act of walking inside your home feels too expensive. You can have a mind that is still brilliant, still aware, still capable of understanding exactly what's happening, and a body that refuses to cooperate because the body has filed cooperation under the category of danger. You can have intention and still be immobilized. You can want to be clean and still be unable to shower. You can want to be connected and still be unable to reply. You can want to live and still find yourself stuck in a posture of survival that looks, to everyone else, like doing nothing. This is the hidden psychology behind self-neglect. It is not simply the absence of care. It is a specific pattern of self-protection, a system designed to reduce sensation and demand when sensation and demand have become too much. And the longer your body practices this strategy, the more natural it begins to feel, as if this is just who you are now, as if this is your personality, when it is actually your physiology adapting in the only way it believes will keep you safe. Part 5, The Numbness Trade-off. The body has a clever trick, and like most clever survival tricks, it comes with a cost. If movement is dangerous, then the body must make movement less necessary. And to make movement less necessary, it must make your needs less loud. At first, your signals might have been sharp. Hunger was a clear pang. Thirst was a dry throat that wouldn't be ignored. Fatigue was a heavy eyelid that forced you into bed. But when those signals are overridden again and again, when you keep stepping over the laundry, keep ignoring the thirst, keep postponing the meal, your system learns a painful lesson: the signals don't lead to relief. The signals lead to more frustration, more shame, more failure. And so the system starts to dim them. This is how numbness begins, not as a choice but as an adjustment. The brain turns down your internal sensing, the ability to feel the subtle messages of the body, because if you fully felt them, you would be forced to move. You would be forced to confront the gap. And confronting the gap has begun to feel like walking into a fire. So you become less aware, not because you don't care, but because your brain is trying to protect you from the intensity of needing something you don't know how to give yourself. Your baseline shifts downward. You acclimate to discomfort. You acclimate to mess. You acclimate to a level of depletion that would set off alarms in a more regulated nervous system, and you move through it as if it is simply the ambient temperature of your life. And from the outside, this looks like apathy. People see you sitting still and assume you are resting. They see you avoiding basic tasks and assume you are unbothered. But inside, you are not resting. You are holding tension like someone holding a beach ball underwater, using constant effort to keep your needs submerged. The surface looks calm. The internal muscles are burning. That is why you can feel exhausted after doing nothing. It is because nothing is not nothing when it requires you to actively suppress your own survival instincts. Every ignored signal is an inhibition command. Every postponed task is a small act of internal braking. Your nervous system is spending energy to keep you still. And slowly, you start to lose your horizon. You stop thinking about next month, next year, the future you once imagined. Not because you stopped caring about the future, but because your present has become too expensive. You become a person living in a narrow hallway of time, focused only on the next hour, the next moment, the next small avoidance that keeps the system from flooding you with sensation. The trade-off is brutal. Numbness buys peace in the present. But it mortgages your ability to feel alive. Part 6, the world calls it laziness. The outside world has its own logic, and it is the kind of logic that doesn't account for invisible systems. People see outcomes. They see the clutter. They see the cancelled plans. They see the unwashed hair, the skipped meals, the late replies, the missed appointments, and they draw a straight line to a simple conclusion: you don't care. They have a vocabulary that makes them feel safe. They call it laziness. They call it being messy. They call it irresponsibility. If they are feeling generous, they call it a rough patch and recommend tools, planners, habit trackers, morning routines, as if the problem is a missing app. They offer solutions that solve the logistical part completely. A shower takes 5 minutes. Meal prep on Sunday. Just tidy one corner a day. They speak to you as if you are unaware of basic cause and effect, as if you don't know that cleaning lowers stress, or that eating improves energy, or that sleep repairs the body. And you sit there listening, nodding, feeling the familiar sting of shame, because you do know all of that, and the fact that you still can't do it makes you feel even more broken. When you fail to act on their advice, their confusion turns into judgment. They begin to see you not only as messy but as stubborn. They assume you simply don't want it badly enough. They imagine your resistance is a choice, and because they believe it is a choice, they believe you deserve the consequences. This creates a second layer of injury. Not only are you dealing with the freeze of your own system, you are also dealing with the social punishment of being misunderstood. You start to hide. You stop inviting people over because explaining the state of your space is exhausting. You stop answering texts because performing wellness is too expensive. You learn to wear a mask of functionality in the few places you must, saving your job, saving your reputation, but burning through the last reserves of energy you have in order to avoid being seen as a failure. And the tragedy is that this performance doesn't fix the problem. It deepens it. It teaches your nervous system that the world is indeed unsafe, that visibility does lead to threat, that being seen does lead to judgment. So your body doubles down on the only strategy it trusts: withdraw, numb, minimize. You are not only fighting yourself. You are fighting the story the world keeps telling about you. And after a while, it becomes easier to accept their label than to explain the invisible paralysis happening under your skin. Part 7, The Masking Spiral. There comes a moment in this pattern when neglect stops feeling like a mistake and starts feeling like shelter. It is not a shelter you are proud of. It is not a shelter you would recommend to anyone. But it is a shelter in the same way a bunker is shelter: thick walls, limited light, reduced exposure, reduced expectation. You might notice it in small ways. You let the room get messy because a messy room is proof you can't host anyone, which means no one will ask to come over, which means you won't have to perform. You let your appearance slip because looking put together invites questions, invites attention, invites the assumption that you can handle more. You keep your life small because small feels manageable. And there is a bleak logic to it: if you appear broken, perhaps the world will stop demanding you be whole. If you keep your head down, perhaps you can avoid the sharp edge of judgment. If you keep your needs buried, perhaps you won't have to face the pain of wanting something and failing to reach it. But what starts as shelter becomes suffocation. You build the bunker to keep the world out, and one day you realize you have locked yourself inside with the decay. The clutter is no longer just clutter. It is insulation, yes, but it is also evidence, a physical record of days passing while you remain paused. The unwashed dishes are not just dishes. They are a calendar. The unopened mail is not just paper. It is a stack of future consequences waiting like gravity. You begin to live in a house full of open loops, and every open loop costs you energy. Every time you see the laundry and step over it, your brain fires an inhibition signal. Every time you feel thirst and don't move, your body learns a new lesson: intention does not lead to action. And slowly, without meaning to, you train yourself into helplessness, into the sense that your own will has no power. This is the spiral. You mask when you can, you crash when you can't, you hide the crash, you spend energy hiding, you have less energy, you crash deeper. And because the crash is quiet, because it looks like doing nothing, it is easy for everyone else to underestimate how dangerous it is. The bunker keeps you safe from the world. But it also keeps you safe from joy, from pride, from change, from the sharp peaks and valleys that make a life feel real. Part 8, this is not self-sabotage. At some point, you start using a word on yourself that feels like it fits because it explains the shame, self-sabotage. You tell yourself you are ruining your own life. You tell yourself you are your own worst enemy. You frame your neglect as a deliberate war against your own best interests, because that story gives you a villain, and the villain is close enough to blame. But biologically, organisms do not sabotage themselves. They adapt to survive. The story of self-hatred is something the mind builds when it can't interpret the data. The data says something simpler and more unsettling. There is a part of you that is trying to keep you alive, and it has chosen a strategy that made sense once, or made sense in a certain environment, or made sense during a certain season of overwhelming stress, and now it has become miscalibrated. The part of you that refuses to shower, that refuses to cook, that refuses to respond, is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to reduce your metabolic demand in a world it perceives as hostile. It is prioritizing energy conservation over social acceptability. It is choosing invisibility over exposure. It is choosing numbness over sensation. And when you understand that, something shifts, not in the tasks themselves, but in the way you hold yourself. Because if neglect is not moral failure, then shame is not useful. Shame is not fuel. Shame is just another stress hormone, another reason for your body to believe it must shut down. This is the hidden psychology. Neglect is often a shield against the sensation of being you. If your body is the place where stress, trauma, grief, and unspoken fear have been stored, then returning to your body feels like returning to the site of the fire. Of course your system resists. Of course your system numbs. Of course it keeps you floating above yourself rather than fully inhabiting the weight and texture of your own skin. When you stop calling yourself a villain, you can finally see the real conflict. The conflict is not you versus you. The conflict is an outdated survival strategy versus the life you are trying to live now. And that is both terrifying and hopeful, because strategies can be updated, but only if you stop hating the part of you that learned them in the first place. Part 9, the prison that feels like safety. Once the nervous system learns that ignoring signals is a viable way to manage overwhelm, it begins to export that logic into everything. The neglect doesn't stay contained to hygiene or housekeeping, because hygiene and housekeeping were never the real issue. They were just the most visible symptoms. You see it in the stack of unopened mail, the inbox with thousands of unread messages, the bills you can't bring yourself to look at, not because you don't understand money, but because every envelope is a demand, every subject line is an intrusion of reality into the fragile bubble you've built. If you don't open it, it doesn't exist, magical thinking as a form of temporary peace. You see it in health. The dull toothache becomes background noise. The persistent fatigue becomes normal. The strange symptom gets filed into the cabinet labeled later. Not because you don't care about your body, but because going to the doctor requires advocacy, requires attention, requires you to inhabit the vessel you have abandoned. It requires you to face confirmation, and confirmation is terrifying when your coping strategy has been avoidance. You see it in work. Not as incompetence, but as shrinking. You stay in a job beneath your potential because ambition requires visibility, and visibility feels dangerous. You do just enough to avoid consequences, becoming present in body and absent in spirit, a ghost employee protecting yourself from the pressure of being fully seen. You see it in relationships. A text message becomes an open loop demanding closure. How are you? Becomes a question you cannot answer honestly without cracking open the bunker, and you cannot answer falsely without feeling the acid taste of betrayal. So you answer with silence. You watch friendship starve, not because you don't love people, but because love requires energy, and you are rationing energy like someone in a winter storm. And in the quiet of all this, your future self becomes collateral damage. Your future self is the person who will have to pay the interest on every avoided task, every missed appointment, every unopened envelope, every unreturned message. Your present self is buying a small dose of safety with every act of avoidance, and your future self is being charged with the bill. This is the prison. It feels like safety because nothing is asked of you inside it. But it is still a prison because inside it, nothing sustains you either. There is no novelty. No progress. No relief. No real connection. No pride. Only the flat gray hum of survival. And one day, you look around and realize the mess in your hallway and the distance in your relationships and the stagnation in your career are not separate problems at all. They are monuments to the same moment, the moment your nervous system decided it was safer to stop feeling than to keep moving. Part 10, No One is Coming. If this were a movie, this is where the music would swell and the protagonist would stand up and make a dramatic decision and everything would begin to change. But real freeze does not melt like that. There is no climactic shattering of ice. There is no sudden epiphany that washes the dishes and replies to the emails and makes the shower feel easy. Understanding the mechanism does not automatically thaw you. Understanding is not the same as permission. Understanding is like lighting a candle in a bunker. The bunker is still a bunker. The walls are still thick. The air is still stale. But now you can see. You can see the architecture of what you have built. You can see that the thing keeping you safe is also the thing slowly suffocating you. And you might find yourself waiting. Waiting for the fear to subside before you move. Waiting for your nervous system to finally send you a permission slip. Waiting for the outside world to become gentle enough that your body feels it can re-enter it. But the nature of this adaptation is that the permission slip does not arrive from outside. There is no rescuer. There is no moment when the world becomes perfectly safe. There is only you, and the machine that kept you alive, and the choice to begin generating safety internally in the very places you have been avoiding. That is the cruel and honest hinge of this story. If the danger is inside, if the danger is sensation, visibility, being fully alive, then safety must be built inside, too. Not by force, not by shame, not by calling yourself lazy, but by beginning to teach your system, gently and repeatedly, that small movement is not combat, that care is not a threat, that the body can be inhabited without burning down. The room remains as it is. The glass of water is still there. The sink is still full. The phone still holds unanswered messages. The future still waits. Nothing magically unlocks. And yet, the question changes, shifting from accusation to invitation, from what is wrong with you to something quieter, something braver. How much longer can you afford to be this safe? Because being this safe has a price. It costs you the sharpness of joy. It costs you the possibility of pride. It costs you the feeling of living your own life instead of watching it from behind glass. And the only way out is not a sudden heroic leap, but a slow, trembling return, a willingness to risk the pain of feeling alive again in exchange for the chance to actually inhabit the time you have been preserving. If this story touched something in you, if you recognized yourself in even one small detail, I want you to tell me in the comments, just one sentence, what part hit the hardest, or what your nervous system does when it feels overwhelmed, because you might be surprised how many people are quietly living the same hidden pattern. And if you want more stories like this, stories that don't shame you for what your body learned to do, but help you understand it with clarity and compassion, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me, because in the next episodes we'll keep exploring the unseen psychology behind the habits that shape our lives, and we'll keep lighting candles in the places we thought we had to hide.